Hello and welcome to our today's webinar on the topic of how to master the medical device single audit program. I'm Jan Kugel, the director at Qualio, and I will be your host for today. As you might know, at Qualio, we are dedicated to empowering professionals in regulated industries to stay current with the latest trends through engaging webinars. We create a stage for top industry experts and leaders to share real-world experience and actionable guidance. And today's session is all about the MDSAP, one of the most challenging yet rewarding regulatory programs out there. Successfully navigating MDSAP opens doors to 5 major markets with a single audit, but getting it right takes solid operational foundation, clear processes, and the right mindset. And in this webinar, you'll learn the essential ingredients for MDSAP success, how to build the right first-time roadmap, common pitfalls to avoid, and practical tips to improve your audit readiness and confidence. So please use the chat to communicate with us. Please reserve your questions to the Q&A part. There is a question mark and the Q&A area. So please ask your questions only in the Q&A section so we don't miss it and we will be able to answer it. Additionally, please note that you will get a certificate of attendance if you stay with us throughout the session. So keep an eye on your mailbox and you should get it within 2 days. And finally, I'm pleased to introduce Renee Estrada from Qualio, who will be co-moderating today's session and will introduce our speakers after a few words about Qualio. So Renee, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Renee. I'll be the co-moderator for today's session. So it's my job to keep our speakers on track and schedule today and receive your questions throughout the session and pass them along. So yes, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to send in questions. If you have a burning question about the MDSAP or want to dive deeper into something on a particular slide, just add your question at the bottom and I'll pass it along to our speakers at a good moment during the presentation. So we want today to be an interactive experience that's as rewarding and insightful as possible. So don't hesitate to reach out with questions. And if we don't cover your question, we will get back to you after the session to ensure you get an answer. If we could hit to the next slide, I'd just like to introduce our speakers for today. All right, so first up, we have Sumatha Kondabolu. She's a senior quality business partner and my colleague at Qualio. It's her job to support our regulated life science customers with targeted support to help them optimize their quality systems and embed lasting compliance. She has 20 years of QA/RA experience across the medical device and pharmaceutical sectors and has built quality management systems for compliance with FDA 21, CFR 820, Canada's medical devices regulations, and the MDSAP and the MDR and IVDR and much more. So thank you so much, Sumatha. And then next, Heinz Steneberg is the president and CEO of MDSS USA, part of a global in-country representation and consulting company. Heinz has more than 25 years of experience in regulatory, quality management, and clinical roles, including leadership roles at Quest Diagnostics, Carl Zeiss Meditech, Roche Molecular Diagnostics, Abbott Diabetes Care, Medtronic Vascular, and St. Jude, now a part of Abbott. Early in his career, he served as a division manager for TUV Rhineland of North America's medical division. So we're thrilled to have two seasoned experts joining and sharing their knowledge today. If we could hit to the next slide, we'll just take a look at our agenda. So we have I guess we have three areas to cover today. First, Heinz will kick us off with the core focus of today's session, what the MDSAP is, what its requirements entail, and what it means for your business. Sumatha will then go deeper in how to prepare your quality management system for the MDSAP, the operational ingredients you need, the processes you should get in place, and some things to consider as you start to turn your company towards MDSAP readiness. Qualio has a really exciting announcement coming next week that we'd like to tease just before section 3. So we'll be offering medical device companies like yours a new way to master MDSAP requirements at speed. So we'll just take a few minutes to share that with you. And then lastly, to wrap up today's session, your chance to get any final questions answered by Sumatha and Heinz. So you leave feeling confident and ready to take on the MDSAP at your company. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Sumatha.
Sorry.
Thank you, Renee. So Heinz will be taking care from here onwards, and then I'll chip in.
Okay. Well, thank you for the kind introduction, Renee, and thank you all for taking time of your morning, afternoon, or evening to attend this webinar. Just giving a bit of background to the MDSAP, or the Medical Device Single Audit Program. The MDSAP started as an International Medical Device Regulators Forum, or IMDRF, initiative in 2012 and entered into the pilot phase in 2014. The program became fully operational in 2017. And as part of the core vision of the MDSAP program, it is to ensure the highest standards of safety for medical devices while minimizing regulatory burden through use of an agreed upon single audit program. So that is the core vision of the MDSAP. The 5 countries that are participating in the medical device single audit program are Japan, Canada, the United States, Australia, and Brazil. And the vision is to, for those countries, or for the regulators in those countries, is to provide a single audit program to reduce the burden on manufacturers through a single audit. There is currently no formal announcement that any additional countries will join. However, several regulatory agencies accept MDSAP certificates, including the Singapore Health Science Authority, as well as regulatory bodies in South Korea, Taiwan, and the WHO pre-qualification program. Passing through the MDSAP audit process and thus getting the simultaneous stamp of approval for quality management system is of course not easy. It's designed to be rigorous. After all, it is any issue can affect devices that are distributed not just in those 5 countries, but essentially in a larger group of countries. And today's session is about preparing you for the journey to MDSAP certification. MDSAP certification is slightly more expensive and challenging when compared to ISO 13485 alone. There are additional requirements in those 5 countries that need to be implemented as part of the quality management system, and those have to be audited by the MDSAP auditing bodies. But there are substantial benefits, given that only one audit is required to demonstrate compliance with several national quality management system regulations. The internal teams in your company need to prepare only once and support only one audit rather than doing that several times. And that saves considerable time and effort. Most importantly, the audit can be scheduled, so no surprise audit. And let me qualify that. Regulators still have the right to conduct an audit, but it's generally only done if there's a reason to assume that the company is not in compliance. There are currently several MDSAP auditing organizations available to conduct these audits. The last count is 15, I checked yesterday, and many of those are also European notified bodies or international quality system assessment organizations. So MDSAP certification is often a case of a short-term effort and cost now, putting the effort and the cost upfront, but this will bring long-term success and lowering the compliance burden. The ISO 13485 requirements form the core of the MDSAP requirements, but it's not just ISO 13485. There are additional requirements contained in national regulations of the member states. In the US, where the FDA is currently transitioning from 21 CFR 820 to ISO 13485, the new quality management system rule includes specific US requirements. There are also other specific requirements in each of the MDSAP participating countries in terms of medical device adverse event reporting, advisory notice reporting, device marketing authorization, and facility registration. Most prominently in the area of advisory notice, where all of the countries have their special additional requirements. Now, to be country specific, in Australia, the TGA uses the MDSAP audit report and certificate usually as part of the evidence to support an application for the TGA conformity assessment. This is a crucial step for manufacturers who need to demonstrate that their quality management system meets the requirement of the Australian Therapeutic Goods Regulations of 2002. In most cases, if an MDSAP certificate is available, the TGA performs a desktop review of the MDSAP audit reports. This means they review the documentation remotely without a physical on-site inspection. Obviously, the product-specific requirements need to be met, so Australian TGA will ask for evidence of CE marking, 510(k) clearance, or other regulatory approval issued in by another regulatory agency that they recognize. And one of the specialties of the TGA is that they need to, that the MDSAP certificate needs to specifically state, and the audit reports need to specifically state, that the manufacturer's quality management system was assessed and found to be in compliance with relevant aspects of the Australian regulations. For Brazil, Anvisa generally recognizes the MDSAP reports, although reports with grades, non-conformity grades 1 to 3, which is in the lower spectrum, and I will discuss how this ranking is prepared in a later slide. So the lower non-conformity grades must have a satisfactory action plan, and reports with a higher non-conformity grades, those on 4 or 5, must state that the corrective actions have been closed in order to be part of a successful application. And as I said, I will discuss the non-conformity grading later in this presentation. Canada, among the 5 countries, among the 5 MDSAP countries, is the only country where MDSAP certification is mandatory. All the other countries accept other evidence of quality management system effectiveness, but Canada is the only one that requires MDSAP certification. As with other countries, manufacturers of moderate and high-risk devices, meaning medical devices in the Canadian risk classes 2, 3, and 4, must file a device license application with Health Canada in order to gain approval. Now, Japan is allowing marketing authorization holders to submit their audit report in lieu of pre-inspection requirements, but for certain devices, such as human cells and tissue devices or IVDs that have radioactive substances, the PMDA still requires inspection. And as always, the PMDA has the right to inspect any company. In most cases, they will just not do it because they are part of the MDSAP program. And as always, a marketing authorization application is submitted for the specific device. So the quality system certificate alone is a part of it, is an important part of it, but it's not the only document, not the only piece of evidence that manufacturers need to submit. Now in the US, as I mentioned earlier, the FDA just moved towards ISO, was moving towards ISO 13485 implementation. That process will be completed in February of next year. FDA still conducts inspection if the result of the MDSAP audit are such that there's a doubt about the compliance and about the effectiveness of the quality management system. Also, FDA will conduct pre-approval inspections for PMAs. That's not something that's covered by the MDSAP program. So, but in general, FDA, and that is specifically CDRH, accepts and is plays a very active role in the MDSAP process. Now, let me briefly look at the audit timeframe. The first part of the audit is usually what's called a stage 1 audit. The stage 1 is where the company's information will be reviewed by the auditor. So commonly, companies send their quality manual, certain SOPs, other documentation to the auditor upfront. And the auditor then reviews the documentation and determines, hopefully determines that the company is ready for the stage 2 audit. Usually stage 1 audits are performed remotely nowadays and not on site. In the stage 2, companies are being audited, and that's usually an on-site audit, although there's a trend towards doing that remotely. But it's still usually an on-site audit, specifically as the initial certification audit. So assuming everything goes well, an audit report will be provided by the MDSAP auditing organization to the regulatory agencies in the 5 countries, to the FDA, Anvisa, TGA, PMDA in Japan, and Health Canada. The second and third year, there will be surveillance audits, so a limited scope audit, and a full recertification audit in year 4. So that is usually the schedule for the audit. For this marketing device authorization, and there are a couple of elements that auditors focus. They usually follow a certain sequence and start with management, then go into measurement, analysis, and improvement, then design and development, and production and service controls, and end with purchasing. These 5 processes are built on a foundation of requirements for risk management, and since ISO 13485 is very much intertwined with ISO 14971. And obviously, quality management system requirements in the specific countries are evaluated as the auditors go through the quality system. I said that I wanted to talk about grading. This, in case of a non-conformity, a unique ingredient of the MDSAP is the non-conformity grading system. In an effort to make non-conformity grading more consistent, the MDSAP does away with traditional criteria such as significant findings, regular finding, significant opportunity for improvement, or other such ratings, and instead uses a tiered system introduced by the Global Harmonization Task Force, GHTF. The MDSAP's grading system works in 2 ways: by assigning points to nonconformities observed against ISO 13485 in a 4-point grading matrix. And you see that here on the screen. First and repeat findings, as well as indirect quality management system impact. So let's explore how each step works. First, if finding does not have a direct, if it has only an indirect impact, such as an administrative enabler, that is usually a lower risk finding. And if it's then a first-time finding, then it would be assigned a non-conformity grading 1. A repeat finding in the same risk class would be assigned a non-conformity grade 2, something that has a direct impact on the quality, performance, safety of a product would then either assign a 3 or a 4 grade. A 4 if it is a repeat, a 3 if it's an initial finding. So with this system, this system uses this grading as a first step, and then there is an escalation rule, because the most serious type of nonconformity finding in audit would therefore be recurring nonconformity with direct impact on your quality management system. As we've seen in the previous slide, that would be a 4. But if it's unsupported by any documented process and has actually caused a nonconformity, there would be 2 additional points. However, the MDSAP scores are capped at 5, even though that score would be a 6, but it would still be a very serious finding in this case. So the higher the rating, the higher the score, the worse the finding, so to speak, and the more challenging it will be for companies to get back into compliance.
Heinz, while we're on the subject, what are some of the most common nonconformities observed during MDSAP audits in your experience?
Well, corrective preventive action, right? It's one of those resources. It's one of those, as well as obviously design control, specifically design changes. Those are really common areas, I would say.
Gotcha. And then another question, do MDSAP auditing bodies perform unannounced audits? Is that something you've seen?
No, usually not. That they schedule their audits.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thanks so much. I'll let you continue and might chime in with more.
That's different to what notified bodies auditors do, or FDA. They come, sometimes they announce their inspections and sometimes they don't announce their inspections. It depends on whether a company is in good standing, meaning in presumed compliance, or not in presumed compliance.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, but be prepared to go remote. About a third of the audits now have some offsite element, and that's a trend. I mean, we've seen that starting during the COVID pandemic, but it's still continuing. And I don't believe we're fully there yet. The FDA has, as I mentioned on the slide, a pilot program that's still ongoing, and they're really looking into the area of remote auditing. But eventually that may come. I see the trend towards that, but we're probably not quite yet there where all the audits will be remote. It would certainly save some time and money for auditors to travel, but I think it would probably also take something away from the audit, because it's a former auditor. I would say that you get a good feel of how the company is performing when you're on site. Is much better than doing that remotely. And I think that was my last slide that I had, and handing it over to Sumatha.
Thank you. So today I'll be talking about so if you can move on to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you very much. So here with an overview of the medical device development and the critical role of a quality management system, QMS goes beyond regulatory compliance. It serves as a foundation for ensuring safety, effectiveness, and long-term success in bringing medical devices to the market. We start with the research phase. So here you can see on the left side, the basic research, the prototype design, and then the preclinical development all at this stage, the focus is on testing feasibility and ensuring the concept has real potential. Next comes early development. So this is where design and development planning takes shape. User needs are translated into design inputs, and we move into the build to test to refine cycle. So from there, we progress to the late development, where verifications and validation confirm that the design meets both specifications and user needs. It's also where we prepare for design transfer into manufacturing, ensuring that every step is documented and traceable. Finally, we move into the life cycle phase. So this is where it includes the regulatory filings, product launch, and post-market monitoring. Importantly, the quality management system does stop at launch. So it drives continuous improvement. So you may have to, the post-market surveillance, you need to keep an eye on the feedback that you will be receiving from the end users. So capturing all these lessons learned and supporting long-term safety and performance of the device or the product. So in short, your QMS needs to touch the entire life cycle of your device, as you can see here on this slide.
Looks like we're getting some questions from the audience, Sumatha. If you don't mind, just a couple questions. So I have one here. Is it important to define the device classification in early development stage?
That's a good point. I would say if it is possible, yes, because that's where you will be able to have a clear picture about like how you're going to design the complete device. So I would say if you would be able to define the classification, and recently, like I have seen some of manufacturers have questions on, like they have developed a hardware and later on they plan to add in a software, So you need to plan accordingly and see how you're going to register this particular device in the specific targeted market. So based on that, if you classify, I think that would be helpful for you.
Great. And then sort of relatedly, is the device development applicable for established product?
Sorry, okay, can I ask you to repeat, Renee?
Yeah, sure. So is device development applicable for an already established product? We might need more details on this question, but that's just kind of what's in the chat.
Okay, so no worries. So I think it all depends on like if you're starting a completely new product which you haven't developed before. So based on that, you need to put together all the specific information beforehand when you start developing the product. But however, there are sometimes like you might already have a product in the market and then you are enhancing that specific product, or maybe a new product that you want to bring in that belongs to the same family. So based on that, you can take some information from the existing documentation and then start documenting that. It all depends on the criticality and then the risk factor associated with the overall product, especially when you are considering the end user and then the intended use of this particular device. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'll let you continue and we'll get to questions as they come and also at the end of the session. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So now so here you can see that the ingredients of the list. So let's look at what actually makes up a strong QMS. So think of this as your ingredient list for the success. So first you need a quality manual or a policy. So this sets the tone for your organization's commitment to quality. Second, an integrated QMS that connects every function, research, design, production, as well as the life cycle. Third, a management review process that keeps leadership engaged and aligned. That's very important. And followed by the clear evidence of senior management commitment, which the regulators want to see the top level involvement. So that I would strongly recommend. Then the document control process, because without traceability, compliance falls apart. And finally, marketing registration and approval processes across all relevant MDSAP territories. So this ensures your device is ready not just locally but globally. When all these ingredients are in place, your QMS becomes more than a checklist. It's a system that supports innovation, compliance, and long-term market success. So there were some questions around like based on if you need to go only for the MDSAP, or you can also have the certification which is globally accepted. Yes, it is accepted, but the thing is you may also have to comply with the local regulations apart from what the MDSAP requirements are, like how Heinz has mentioned before in the previous slides. And here, if you see the followed by the next steps, where I think I skipped one slide before. Yeah, internal audit. So here, when you talking about the internal audit process, so regular audits are essential to identify gaps, verify compliance, and ensure continuous improvement. Data analysis SOPs, for example, you have a standard operating procedure for data analysis. So this ensures that the metrics are reviewed consistently and that the decisions are based on evidence rather than assumptions. Then the corrective preventive actions and the related processes. So you need to clearly document the processes for corrective preventive actions, handling non-conforming materials, as well as the managing complaints, adverse effects or the adverse events, and then the post-market surveillance. So these documents provide traceability and demonstrate accountability. Followed by the adverse event management, fourth, robust adverse event management. This is a critical patient safety and regulatory compliance, ensuring that risks are identified and addressed promptly. And the last is the CAPA records here in the slide, which maintains, so you need to maintain the CAPA records. So these serve as a proof that issues have not only been identified, but effectively resolved and monitored over the time. So together, these elements transform your quality management from a static framework into a living system, one that actively monitors, corrects, and improves performance across the product life cycle. So on the previous slide, so which I have covered about the foundational ingredients of a quality management system. Now let's take a closer look at the operational elements that keep the system running effectively day to day. For example, the specific details about the end-to-end design process with the defined inputs and outputs. So it starts with a structured end-to-end design process. So you need to have the inputs and outputs are clearly defined and traceable, followed by the verification and validation. Verification ensures the design meets its specifications, while validation confirms the device fulfills user needs and intended use. Followed by the change control. So change control documentation is very critical. You need to make sure that whenever there are any specific changes you have done, you have a proper documentation for that, and then that's approved. Followed by, if there are any impacted documents, you need to update those documents based on this specific change. And these changes are also need to be assessed and approved to prevent unintended risks. Followed by the design review and transfer. So formal design review provide checkpoints for quality, and design transfer ensures smooth handoffs into the manufacturing without loss of information. So it's very important, specifically the design team, how they are communicating to the production team is very critical and important. They need to have, the production team need to have all the specific documentation, including the specifications and the different checkpoints they need to follow, both in for the raw materials, or for if it is a hardware device, and especially in the in-process production, and then following the final and then the packaging production areas too. So you need to make sure especially the design team has to make sure that this has been communicated properly to the production team. And especially if there are any changes in the design, those need to be immediately monitored and then communicated to the production team. Next is the validation and clinical data. So validation is often supported by clinical or performance data, which becomes key evidence for regulatory submissions. Then the software processes, and if you have a device that includes the software, so you need to make sure that the specialized processes are needed to validate the code, manage the updates, as well as maintain the cybersecurity if the software is specifically an app, or maybe you are collecting all the data on the
So,
device.
um,
Yes, Rennie.
Well, while we're on this slide, just a couple questions have come in. So let's see, we have here, what about design verification and review steps? What's required? That might be quite a big question there, but if you could share a little bit.
So design verification steps. That's what is it, Renee?
Yeah, yes, correct.
Okay. So it's a broader question, but I will try to summarize or provide you the key details in it. So the verification step when you perform, so you need to identify the test cases according to the risk that is associated at each level. For example, like you have the design inputs and then the design requirements which you have written. And then based on that, you might have identified the risks, where all the risks are, and then how you're going to mitigate them. And then now you are also verifying to make sure that everything is taken care, there aren't any major issues happening. And then accordingly, you need to also create the test cases in such a way, specifically if it's a hardware device, the acceptable quality limits, and how to what extent that can be accepted and released for the next level. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
The big question. And then just another one, I think this will be a little bit shorter. How do you check the how will we check the effectiveness of CAPA, and what will be frequency of monitoring? Not sure if you can touch on that.
Yeah, sure. So the CAPA, you need to, so once you receive, you have initiated a CAPA, so you will have a specific time duration. Apart from this, I would recommend before the management review meetings, you can collect and analyze all the data that is existing, and based on that, if there are any actions you need to perform or you need to take or present to the senior management, this is where the time you can pull all the information then and verify and present, and then take necessary actions on the CAPA. Not only CAPA, the complaints, the non-conformances, if there are any deviations, you need to make sure that if all the data has been analyzed.
Right. I do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
What is the MDSAP expectation for DHR? Is it the same as CFR 820 or something else? And does MDSAP have any specific defined format for that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So one is as you know that the QMSR, which is aligning now with the ISO 13485, which you need to be complying by 2nd of February 2026. So that pretty much covers the 21 CFR 820, but additional requirements that have been changed by the FDA to align with the ISO 13485. So that pretty much makes a more streamlined way of, or the streamlined approach. So you need to comply with those requirements, followed by the other specific requirements from the different countries. If you are planning to launch your product on the other, like in Australia, or maybe in Brazil, Canada, or US. So the DHR, when it comes to your question, you need to follow the 21 CFR Part 820, but I would recommend if you can adapt based on the QMSR requirements, that would be helpful, but pretty much it would be the same.
Right, thanks. I'll let you continue, and we'll save the questions that we got. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So so I'll move on to the next slide. So here, I won't run through this now, but there is a complete medical device design and development pathway for you to steal. So we will share the slides and recording after, so you get the access to this one. So I will go to the next slide. Thank you. So here you can see that the medical device file, the maintaining a complete medical device file. So this serves as the central repository of design, manufacturing, and regulatory documentation essential for both compliance and traceability, followed by the process validation. Every critical process must be proven to consistently deliver the intended results before it is released into production. So many times I get questions on like process validation, what all does it include? So you need to make sure that the various, when I say different processes, it could be the production process, it can be the packaging process or the labeling. So every specific process you need to validate to make sure that whatever the specifications which were written previously by the design team followed by the production team, those are consistently, you are getting those results. So based on that, the process validation need to be performed. And the product realization, so this means aligning the production with the design requirements. So the device manufactured is the device that was approved. Many times it so happens like if the design team might have communicated to the production team, hey, these are the specifications, this is how it need to be manufactured. But after some time, there are some, based on the feedback and maybe they might have thought like we need to modify this specific design, and the design team might have done all the documentation, but however, the communication they might have missed to the production team. So it's always important. So one has to make sure that the production team and design team work closely together. And specifically, if you have a commercial manufacturing organization who does the production process or production part in their location, so you need to communicate and monitor it accordingly. Followed by the risk management. So the risk management, even in production, potential hazards must be identified, monitored, and mitigated. So you need to, from, if I would suggest documenting all the risk, preliminary risk beforehand, so that you know that where all the issues can happen, even with the suppliers. So you need to have at least you need to identify, if you can, alternate suppliers too. So in case if there is any issues with the production delays, you can always go to the next, or you can identify so that you might have already have the alternate suppliers in your approved supplier list. So these are all they get into the risk management process. So followed by the control of defects and rework. So systems for controlling defects and rework, where ensuring that non-conforming products are addressed properly and don't reach patients. Specifically, if there are any non-conforming products during the production process, you need to immediately, the team who does the quality control during the production process, they need to identify these and then separate them from reaching out to the, or maybe going to the next level of packaging. The identification and traceability. So here, every component and finished device must be traceable, like trackable or traceable, which is essential for recalls, investigations, and post-market monitoring. So it's very important that the identification and traceability is very key. Followed by the installation and servicing. So finally, the installation and servicing for the devices where you think that what is important and how those warranties, and then during the device validation process, have you identified all the warranty specific requirements? Why I'm saying this, for example, like you have various different components, and then one or two components might be like may not be valid. The supplier might have given you only for 6 months validity, but whereas your device, the complete finished product, has a warranty for 1 year. So you need to make sure that the validation, when you perform the device validation, all these documentation has been done properly, and based on that, you are verifying. Because if you get complaints and then you have to do a like servicing, or maybe, you know, rework on the particular device, it so happens that it's not matching with the initial plan, where some of the parts are not functioning properly, because the supplier from their end, they say that yes, we have mentioned about to you that it is 6 months, but whereas your overall product, yourself, you're claiming it as for 1 year. So you need to be cautious on having those critical factors associated. You need to monitor them and accordingly document at every stage. So these are the protection and service control ingredients that are critical, because they safeguard product quality at scale and ensure that patients receive devices that are both safe and reliable. So here, when I am talking about the next step, where the ingredients list is the purchasing and outsourced processes or planning. So in the previous slides, I was talking about the supplier. So this is where you need to plan and purchase and outsource the processes. Clear procedures ensure that the suppliers deliver materials and services that meet your requirements. Followed by the supplier management and auditing. So you need to oversight continuously, like, you know, ongoing oversight is necessary to confirm that the suppliers maintain consistent quality and compliance. And you need to also have the quality agreements in place, specifically if there are any critical suppliers. Followed by the risk evaluation. So every supplier relationship introduces potential risks. So evaluating and documenting those risks is a key part of the quality management system. And verification and traceability of the purchased product. So this means confirming materials meet specifications and ensuring they can be, traced back through the supply chain. Then the auditing of the critical suppliers. So if you can, that would be the best possible way of auditing and documenting those critical suppliers as part of your own audit process. So this demonstrates due diligence and strengthens your regulatory stand. So in short, the suppliers as well as the purchasing controls protect you from external vulnerabilities and ensure that quality and compliance extend beyond your organization into your entire supply chain. So with that said, I'll move on to the next slide. So here you can see that your QMS should reflect the risk and complexity of your device, not too light, not over-engineered. Because your MDSAP auditor will be exploring linkages, pay special attention to these areas. Can you adopt digital QMS documents that allow cross-linking and cross-referencing between standard operating procedures, records, process instructions, and so on? So are the inputs and outputs clearly documented? Make sure your team has the resources to actually run and sustain your quality processes. Maintain records that show your quality management system isn't just on paper, it's active and working. And then keep measuring and monitoring. Effectiveness is everything, not just compliance. And finally, have a clear organization structure. So organizational structure, because even something as simple as org chart can show your auditing organization who is responsible for what. Specifically, if you have management representative, you can identify and then make sure that those specific requirements are reflecting in the management representative's job description.
Relatedly, Sumatha, we have a question. So is a medical device regulatory consulting services organization needed to attain MDSAP? And would they fall into the org chart as well if you have outside services?
So can I ask you to repeat the question again, Renee?
Yeah, yeah. So is a medical device regulatory consulting services, are they needed to obtain MDSAP? And if you do have consulting services, you include them in the org chart as well?
That's a good question. So generally, I would say may not necessary, because if the consulting organization, if they are providing a specific expertise, for example, like complete design development is being developed by that consulting organization, they may come under the scope of the audit, but however, may not be necessary unless until if they are providing any specific, as I mentioned, services that impacts their customers. Maybe I can ask Heinz also, Heinz thoughts on this specific question.
Yes, I do agree that the consulting organization is not necessarily required. It depends obviously on the capabilities of the company. If they have the capabilities to implement and maintain the MDSAP, meaning ISO 13485 plus quality system, then obviously an external consulting organization is not needed. But if entire functions, and you mentioned design control, for example, are outsourced, then I think it's a question is how this would be linked within the quality system to the company. Would there be someone overseeing the external organization, someone from the senior management group, for example? So this is a really good question, but the general answer is it depends, and it depends on the specific set.
Thank you, Hans. I think we can go to the previous slide. Yeah, thank you. So here, up to this point, so we have talked about, so I have talked about the ingredients of a strong quality management system. So now let's connect that to the bigger picture. So why ISO 13485 provides the best baseline for MDSAP success. So here you can see the strategic planning, ISO 13485. It supports early planning by structuring design inputs and resource evaluation, making sure projects start with clarity and control. And the preclinical testing, where you can see that if then supports the feasibility studies, portfolio planning, and then the organization of preclinical evidence that is needed to move forward, followed by the collation of the essential requirements. So next, ISO 13485, it ensures a structured documentation, completion of safety and performance reports, and reimbursement plannings, and then followed by the regulatory submission. So when it's time for regulatory submission, ISO 13485, it provides the framework for self-certification or notified body submissions aligning with global requirements. But however, you need to ensure that based on the classification of the device and then the risk factor that is associated, based on that you need to document and then proceed further with the regulatory submissions. Next is the post-market surveillance and vigilance. Here you can see that finally the ISO 13485, it extends into the post-market activities, specifically the formatting, the the post-market surveillance, managing line extensions, and as well as the supporting registries and audits, and controlling design changes. So overall, the ISO 13485 doesn't just help you prepare for the MDSAP, but it also provides you the base for the entire product life cycle, specifically the documentation, maintaining your quality management system. So a digital ISO 13485 QMS, it streamlines the compliance and also reduces duplication and ensures consistency across the territories. So here you can see that the MDSAP Global is a great place to visit if you want more info about the program. So you can access the document template for some key processes and policies, find a suitable auditing organization who can assess, and then also, you can also get some training modules and more from this specific site. Thank you, Renee.
Awesome. So for us at Qualio, the MDSAP compliance challenges we've discussed today aren't just something for medical device companies to think about. As an EQMS provider with hundreds of medical device customers, understanding where regulatory professionals are being challenged by regulatory compliance and how to alleviate that burden is a critical part of our product development roadmap at Qualio. We've been considering these challenges and working on something really exciting to share with our current and future customers. So just here's a quick little preview before we get to our Q&A. I know there's a lot of questions in the chat. I've had my eye on it. So, you know, a lot of growing life science companies face rising compliance complexity from expanding product portfolios, new markets, and overlapping global regulations, right? So manual reactive compliance processes such as spreadsheets, siloed tools, and expensive consultant support are struggling to keep pace with frequent release cycles or complex multi-jurisdictional requirements, just like the MDSAP, right? And getting it wrong means, you know, delay, loss of market access, product recalls, or even regulatory penalties down the line. So, you know, how are you planning to manage your MDSAP compliance alongside your other regulatory requirements? I'm sure a lot of those approaches in the previous slide look really familiar, along with their limitations. So at Qualio, we're solving these problems with a brand new product launching just next week. Compliance Intelligence connects your quality system to provide a single source of truth for your compliance activity, all underpinned by AI. So Compliance Intelligence lets you unlock and apply deep regulatory knowledge with AI, infuse that regulatory expertise into your organization, not just with your SMEs or expensive consultants. Automate compliance with the MDSAP, ISO 13485, and more without sacrificing any control or trust, and really replace those siloed systems and point-in-time audits with real-time visibility. So moving away from that static kind of format. And this allows you to build confidence across teams, regulators, and leadership. So you know exactly where you are and where you aren't compliant and what you need to do to fix it. So I just want to take another minute or two to show you how it works. And so Compliance Intelligence is constructed around expert-built, validated frameworks and controls tailored for medical device companies. That means quality and compliance benchmarks like the MDSAP and ISO 13485 are built into the tool by our team of regulatory experts, so you can quickly and easily see how aligned you are with the requirements that matter to your business. So why does this matter, right? You get real-time compliant visibility into compliance health. So taking some of the guesswork out of the manual work from your MDSAP preparations. I know just monitoring the Q&A, there's a lot of guesswork and a lot of questions. So this kind of helps eliminate that. You can sidestep, costly or time-consuming delays from missing or incomplete compliance evidence, really preserving that investor confidence and operational momentum. Plus, you can link organizational evidence to multiple regulatory standards, letting you tackle multiple audits in parallel without duplicating your efforts. So you can have things running simultaneously. So you can really, help eliminate that expensive consultant report or hundreds of hours of manual data gathering and product management. So tackle more audits, products, and markets without a whole lot of extra headcount. So one-click AI-powered gap analysis with secure, traceable, and human-in-the-loop AI, right? This is something that you're still monitoring. It's just kind of giving you a heads up so you can move faster. Manually preparing for an external audit like MDSAP takes an average of 20 weeks, but with Compliance Intelligence AI monitoring, it takes it down to 40 minutes to guide you through every compliance gap. So you could prepare in, as quick as 4 weeks even. And with closed loop remediation, you can keep you on track to resolve gaps efficiently, to really drive the right first time compliance approach that ensures everything is ready when audit day arrives. And that way you're not scrambling. And I think what's really exciting is, our compliance intelligence product can spot gaps before you might not even have noticed them, letting you close those gaps before they escalate, avoiding some of the costly CAPAs and operational disruptions and that last minute panic before your MDSAP auditor knocks on the door. So the knock-on effect of this approach can be powerful when we consider the size of the economies in the MDSAP program. And I think, lastly, just some early adopter data shows that compliance intelligence cuts market time entry by 60 to 75%. So really accelerating your regulatory approval processes and getting you to market before your competitors. And, it's not just about getting to market, it's about predictive risk alerts and remediation recommendations to really combine and give you that continuous compliance that, doesn't slip up and is always on. So better audit readiness, reduce costs, and total real-time compliance visibility, and the ability to tackle new markets and new audits with confidence. So yeah, we really wanted to give our customers a system that gets you audit ready and then keeps you audit ready forever. So we're incredibly excited to launch Compliance Intelligence, our new software product that shields you from delays and setbacks and fines and recalls and any sort of audit surprises. So keep an eye on Qualio's website and social media next week as we launch it. And with that, we're going to get back to the Q&A. So let's hear your MDSAP and compliance questions that we have time for in this next 10, 15 minutes or so. So thanks for letting me share a little bit, and let's get to it. All right, so one of the first questions we have here is, okay, I believe you touched on this, Sumatha, but do we need a separate audit for ISO 13485 and MDSAP?
Yeah, Renee, I've just answered the question. So, but yes, it's for for everyone. It would be nice to ask. So, for the internal audits, it's up to you. Like you can do together, or you can have them separate audits. But whereas with the notified body, like when you are planning, you can make sure that the audit is completed all together. So for internal audits, it's up to you. Like you want to do it separately or together, it's fine.
Gotcha. Okay, another question about supplier qualification. So how do you deal with supplier qualification if there is only one supplier which does not have GMP implementation competency and lack of regulatory expectation knowledge?
But however you plan to go with that particular supplier is maybe they are depending upon their specific expertise on a particular technology. If that is the case, you may still need to make sure that in your quality agreement you put a specific point on that the supplier has to follow or adapt the ISO 13485 and MDSAP requirements throughout the production process. Because if that doesn't adapt it, then it means like it has not been done, and then they might have not complied with all the regulatory requirements. Maybe Heinz may have more on this.
Let me chime in. So it truly depends on how you want to exercise control over that supplier. You could go down to requiring a certificate of conformity where you see that critical points of the product or material that's provided by the supplier have been checked, verified before the supplier ships it, or you have to implement appropriate inspection steps for that specific material or product that you're purchasing from that supplier. That could be part of it. If they don't have a quality management system to ensure consistent quality, then you may need to go to that step.
Thank you, Heinz.
Yeah, moving on to the next question, is MDSAP applicable for drug device combination products, or is it only for standalone devices?
Heinz, you want to take this question?
Yeah, the scope is devices. The question is, how is the combination product generally regulated? Now, and that comes down to the primary mode of action. So if you're looking at something like a drug-eluting stent, for example, going way back when to my early days, the product was primarily regulated by CDRH because the primary intended use was that of a device, and the auxiliary function was the drug function. So I think in this case, yes, but if it's the other way around, if it's primarily a drug and then or pharmaceutical or other product that is not a device, and the device provides an auxiliary function, then obviously MDSAP would not be something that applies.
All right. Next question. Could you share some insights on device shelf life assessment, stability indicating parameters, and I guess actually the what's sorry, just refining this question. Actually, this is the most challenging situation with all device supplier manufacturers who do not have a formal stability program. So I guess just really sharing insights on device shelf life assessment and stability indicating parameters.
Yeah, maybe Heinz may have more on this, but I'll provide some of the information which I know about it. So, so when it comes to the shelf life, so whatever the specific testing or the requirements that you need to, so during the design verification and validation, you will be already setting up those test cases, correct? So based on that, you need to perform and then see that to what extent that can be used, and then according to that, you will also be identifying the usage period specifically for based on your intended purpose, and if there are any reusable medical devices, for example, like if it is a hardware that is associated with. So based on that, you need to make sure that what are the various different factors are associated in the usage of this particular device, and then based on that, if anything gets affected for on the specifically the product quality, then based on that you need to define.
Right.
Heinz,
And
you have
usually,
anything
yes.
that you want to
Thank you
add
so
to
much. I
this?
just wanted to chime in. So usually that's defined in a protocol that is part of your design verification activities, where you assess the shelf life of the product, simulate transport, storage under conditions. Usually, some regulators accept accelerated aging here. Most regulators only accept real time, but they're open to negotiations there. So it really depends on the type of product and what you have, the storage conditions, the transport conditions. If you're looking at something like an IVD reagent that needs to be shipped on dry ice or frozen, and then kept frozen, that's obviously highly critical, and it's a different protocol compared to something that is maybe a catheter or a disposable product that can be stored at room temperature and shipped through the normal process without dry ice. So, but it's important to define the criteria, it's important to define the conditions, and it's important to get FDA feedback or other regulator feedback as much as that is possible on the protocol, because the shelf life studies are usually very expensive and they take a long time, and getting it right is critically important.
Absolutely. That's very important, specifically when you are doing, I think you can also consider everything as a part of a risk that is associated during the validation process. Thank you.
Thanks. Relatedly, what's the typical time frame to respond to an audit observation?
If it is an audit observation from the notified body, so generally it depends on um, the criticality of, like, if it's a major audit observation, and it depends on, like, your certification will get delayed for that particular audit observations, so you need to act immediately, and it all depends on the notified body and then the auditor, so they will provide you the information. And specifically, if it is again from the internal audit itself, so you need to make sure that as soon as possible, if you comply with all those requirements that are associated with this particular audit observation, I think you need to comply and then provide those actions immediately and implement at the earliest.
Gotcha. All right. I know we're kind of getting a little bit short on time. So I'll ask some quicker questions. Is PRRC required for MDSAP?
I can take that. The PRRC is a requirement that comes from the European Medical Device or IVDR directives. That's not an MDSAP requirement.
Gotcha. Great. Let's see. This one might be another quick one. If you already have regulatory approval from FDA and TGA, will the auditing process with MDSAP go through the technical file again for those countries?
I can take that. No, normally they will not do that. And normally the auditors will not review the technical files. The technical files will then be reviewed by the regulators in a separate submission.
All right. And then how will new QMSR impact MDSAP? Will it simplify the process or lengthen it?
I think it would simplify the process because you already are, suppose if you are implementing or already in the process of implementation for to align with the QMSR requirements, so it will help you in streamlining and then preparing for the MDSAP audit. But however, again, it depends on which geographical location you are planning to launch the product. So if it is only for US, so the QMSR would help you. And then 13485, that would help you to create the baseline for the foundation for the entire quality management system. But apart from this, you need to also keep an eye on all the other regulations that impacts based on the product that will be launched in the different locations.
Right. And then maybe one of the last questions here, Sumatha, this might be for you, referring to the slide related to design and development. Curious to know what changes have been made before design transfer also need to go through the control process. So I can repeat that if you need.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Renee. So this was very clear. So it all depends on the various different changes that you have done during the process. Specifically, like if you have made some changes after the design validation. So based on that, you need to again verify and perform those test cases, make sure that those are approved, changes are approved, and all the impacted documents are also reviewed and approved before you are going for the design transfer. Because at the design transfer phase, that will be your almost like the final stage where you are going to transfer all the specifications, like Heinz mentioned, the protocols, all the validation documents, everything will be provided to the production process. So you need to ensure that if there are any changes, they are properly documented and approved.
Right. And then do preventative actions need to be checked for effectiveness? Going back to
the corrective preventive actions, so specifically the preventive actions, I would recommend to verify for the effectiveness, because so in this way you are monitoring closely all the actions that you intend to take, specifically when they are associated with the preventive action. Anything else to add here, Heinz?
No, I think that's about right. It
all
covers it.
right. Great. And then I think this will end on this question, just because I know we're wrapping up, we're a little bit over time. What are the most common nonconformities in surveillance and recertification audits?
So what are the common
most common nonconformities in surveillance and recertification audits?
I would, Heinz may add more, but I would, with my experience, what I have seen is specifically on the complaints, corrective documenting the corrective preventive actions and nonconformities. If there are any nonconformities during the production process, how that has been documented, what kind of process is being taken care there, and then the labeling, validation, or the intended purpose, how that is being provided on the labeling. So you need to make sure that every specific process that gets impacted, those are all validated. So validation document is also very key there. And then changes, if there are any changes, you need to comply with those as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Specifically design changes, that's usually an area where findings occur. Just companies don't realize that they have to look at other requirements outside of the US and maybe Europe, Australia, Japan, and consider all of those requirements when they implement a design change. Obviously, that assumes that the products will be sold eventually in those countries.
So back to like nonconformities and sort of the grading. What is a major cause that would cause me to escalate to phase 2 or step 2? I hope it's clear.
Yeah, of course. Heinz, you want to take this question?
Well, I mean, the first stage is really to assess readiness for an audit. So if there's not enough evidence to suggest that the company has effectively implemented a quality management system, say if the procedures are not effectively implemented, they're still in draft stage, or major procedures are still in draft stage. Management reviews haven't been done. Now, I'm not saying that companies need to send their management review records, but they need to at least confirm that, yes, we had management reviews. Yes, we implemented an effective internal audit system and everything is up and running. Yes, we have an effective corrective preventive action system. We deal with nonconformities. So if that's not provided, if there's no evidence that all of that is effectively implemented, then the auditor shouldn't proceed with a stage 2 audit.
All right. And then another question here, is the paper system acceptable from your point of view, or a paperless system? What about a combination of the two systems?
Ooh, paper. Well, technically, there is no requirement that says you have to use an electronic system. However, it's probably very challenging to implement a paper system in a larger company. It may work for a startup company, small company, but for a larger company or mid-sized company even, or more company that's been in business for several years, probably not recommended. I mean, again, it's not compliance, and I'm not saying paper systems cannot be compliant. A hybrid system can be compliant as long as it's clearly defined. However, I would say that is probably something that, since it's semi-manual and semi-electronic, that is a bit challenging to maintain and could lead to more observations and deficiencies, just from experience. But it doesn't have to be necessarily. So again, there is no regulation that says you cannot have it, but it's challenging.
Yes, Heinz, I totally agree with you. And I'll share my experience as an auditor. Like, I also perform audits. So one time it so happened that I was looking for a specific information, and then the auditee mentioned to me that it will take at least 2 days for them to go and retrieve the paper-based records that were associated with the design control process. So how quickly the information can be retrieved, that is important. So based on that, I think you need to think about like which system would be best for your organization, how quickly and reliable the information you can pull in. So that's where the auditors would look for. So with that said, I think I would strongly go with the electronic quality management system. If you can, that would be the best way to implement, and it's easy for you specifically when it comes to the training processes and then documentation management, overall document control, and then records control.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it might be time to check out Qualio if you're looking for something more electronic. All right, and then lastly here in practice, this is kind of a broad question, but maybe you could provide some broad strokes. How do MDSAP and ISO 13485 audits differ? We have somebody who's new to their company who has MDSAP certification, and they've been through a lot of ISO audits, but this will be their first MDSAP audits. So any kind of big differentiators that this person can look out for?
Yeah, I think it's about making sure that country-specific requirements for Japan, Brazil, United States, Australia, Canada are implemented. So the MDSAP auditors are trained to look specifically at these country-specific requirements, and that's throughout the device life cycle. So from design development all the way to the post-market side.
Awesome. All right. Oh, sorry, Sumatha, if you have more to touch on.
Yes, Renee. So to add what Heinz mentioned, I think one has to make sure that when it comes to the country-specific requirements, the document retention period, the retention process, how much that need to be based on the product life cycle, I think you need to focus on those specific areas too.
Awesome.
Thank
Yeah, we still have a couple questions in the chat. They're hyper specific, so we'll get back to those people. We will be in touch to get answers to your questions, just a little bit super case by case detailed. So yeah, I think we're almost wrapping up. Jan, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. So everyone, thank you for joining us for this incredible session. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful from our excellent speakers today. Thanks, Heinz, for joining us today and sharing your time with us. Sumatha, thank you very much. Renee and Qualio, thank you for partnering with us for another excellent webinar. Keep your eyes on our follow-up email for this webinar, as there will be a link to our next webinar with Qualio. And I hope to see all of you with us also at our next event. So on this occasion, I want to wish you all a good evening, good day, good morning, depending where you are, and see you at our next webinar.
All right. Thanks so much.
Goodbye.
you, everyone.